Representative Thissen, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Start by telling us why you have decided not to seek re-election to the House of Representatives.
Well, I think basically it feels like it's the right time to do it. I've been in the legislature for 15 years and pretty much done everything you can do in the House of Representatives, and so I think it's just time for someone else to step in and kind of take the baton from here.
Yeah, and you were elected in 2002.
Yes.
Served as DFL lead from 2011 to 2016, including serving as Speaker in 2013-14. How would you summarize your time spent here at the legislature?
Oh, it's been amazing, and I was able to do much more than I ever imagined I would do, when I was first elected. This is it's a really amazing institution. I guess, one thing I would say is I hope that, as the people of Minnesota and people that serve here remember that part of it, that, this institution is going to last much beyond us. And sometimes we don't treat it the way we should. And so if there's any kind of things I've been thinking about with regard to this, it's that, we just need to make sure that we preserve the really good things about this institution and not demean it more than we should.
Did your priorities change here over the time that you were at the House from when you were first elected in 2002 until now?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the great things about this job is that you meet so many people and you learn a lot. And, listening to people, hearing their stories, going out and visiting them in their communities, I mean, that inevitably and properly changes you and changes your opinions on stuff. As one example, I never really did much in the way of healthcare policy when I first came in, but over the course of my career, that's become one of the things I've spent most of my time on, and it evolved because of responding to constituent needs and a deep interest in that. It was also the area that because I had the least knowledge of, I wanted to get involved in so I could learn it and vote with some knowledge. And in a lot of ways, if there's, that's another thing that's so important about this job is finding those areas that are really complicated and other people don't want to dig into. You can wield a lot of influence and power if you're willing to kind of dig into those issues.
And so do you feel that you were able to accomplish some of what you set out to when you first got into politics?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The reason I first ran was, back in 2002, Jesse Ventura was the governor, and we had these initial budget deficits facing us. And Tim Pawlenty and Roger Moe were both running for governor, and they were running the respective legislative bodies, and they kind of punted on it. And so when I came in, we had a $4 billion deficit. And we really never recovered from those deficits until the time we became the majority and I became Speaker. And we finally got our fiscal house in order. So, from a large perspective, if there's one thing I'm most proud of, it was getting that done, getting our house back in fiscal order. Because if your budgets are in deficit year after year, you're just living crisis to crisis. You can't plan ahead, you can't think about the future. And when you do have budgets in order, then you can do some pretty amazing things. And so I guess, if that was my initial motivation, which it was, I guess we got that done.
How would you say things have changed here in your time at the House, and what is your outlook on how things will go forward?
Well, I think things have become much more nationalized politically and increasingly partisan. I think we've also put more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer people in the legislature. I don't think that that's a good development. The leaders, and I've been on both sides of this, of course, but the leaders probably have too much power these days in terms of shaping the end of session. Those two things are probably the biggest thing. We have much bigger bills than we ever used to. We used to vote on a lot more individual bills. I think there was a little bit more transparency and accountability when I first came in, and a little bit less partisanship when I first came in, and neither of those developments are particularly healthy. The really good thing, I guess, that I've seen, our caucus is now, 50-50 men and women. Many more people of color in our caucus, at least, and in the legislature in general, and I think that's been a really good development.
You talked a little bit about it there, but you've been a supporter of more government openness and transparency. Can that be accomplished in an era where political divisiveness seems to be growing?
Well, it's going to take, I think it can, and it's going to take a couple of steps. We can legislate some of it, so we can put more teeth, more enforcement in our laws to make sure that it's happening. But at the end of the day, it's a cultural thing and a leadership thing. And so it's going to require, I think, the rank and file members to step up and push back against leadership and say, we want more of a voice. And it's also going to take people of Minnesota caring a little bit more of what may seem like a pretty esoteric topic, which is government transparency. But when you think of all of the impact that these bills have on your life, and the fact that so many decisions are being made behind closed doors with very few people, and sometimes with too much special interest influence, I think it's something that people really ought to pay attention to. So we need to raise it up as a matter for the people. And I have to say, as I've gone around the state and talked about this issue, people don't get why, legislators don't get at least 24 hours to review a bill so they know what's in it. And they don't get why hearings aren't open to the public. And if you start to talk to people about it, it makes common sense. But we just need to build that momentum to make a difference.
What will you miss most about your time here at the House?
I think meeting people and getting to hear people's stories. I mean, that's really been the most educational and powerful part of this job. Is you just have people coming in who are doing some amazing things in their communities or who are suffering some pretty tough situations, and you have some power and ability to use that information to change things for the better. And so that is the part I think I'm most going to miss.
The 2018 session, it's rapidly approaching here as we sit here today. Before your time comes to an end here at the House, what issues would you like to see addressed this year?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me would be this transparency and accountability piece. I'd like us to take some steps to make sure that we do open up our process so that the public has more voice in it. If there's anything that concerns me kind of from a very high level right now, it is that people feel like they have no control over their own destiny in their politics, in the economy. And when that starts to happen, then you really start to run into some pretty serious problems as a democracy. And so that piece of accountability and transparency is really, really important.
And before we leave you, do you have any advice for future legislators who might be on the fence maybe about getting into politics or running for public office?
Well, I mean, I think that the first thing is to do it. And the more people that get engaged and involved in it, and I think too often people overthink, making a run for public office. It takes something to put yourself out there, but generally people are really friendly and receptive to it. And then when you're here, I mean, I do think coming back to this idea that remembering that you're part of an institution that was here long before you and is going to be here long after you, and treating the institution with the respect that it deserves from that perspective, I think is really, really important. And if legislators take that approach to things, I think it'll be much better for Minnesotans in general.